Hi, I'm Ashley Robato,
And I'm Dr. Carolyn Meister.
and today we're going to talk to you a little bit more about the chakras or the energy centers and how they correspond to the body, different patterns that show up. And last week we discussed the root, the sacral, and the solar plexus. So this week we're going to move up the chain, if you will, starting with the heart. And this energy center is focused on love and self-love, how we relate to others, our relationships. That's kind of how I think about this energetic center. And in our body, it's very much kind of the place where our ribs sit and where our breath goes. And it's also related to, our shoulder complex as well, and some stuff down into the arms and upper extremity as well. I don't want to go into too much detail because I want to leave some space for Carolyn to say some stuff too. So I'm going to throw it over to her to talk a little bit more about the heart.
You know, whatever you say, I've got lots of space to play still because I always have so much to say about it. Yeah, the heart is the central of the lungs and the heart itself, right? The heart chakra. And it is its basis is the diaphragm, the top is throat. And so we kind of look at the clavicles as that stopping point or that break. And then down kind of the bottom side of the hand is more going to be the heart chakra. So the fun thing about that is exactly what you said. It's about self-love. How do you connect with yourself? How do you connect with your body and the breath? Ta-da! We just gave you the answer. Your breath. What a beautiful thing. Um, and that's the biggest part of connecting with yourself. I just saw a video. Someone was talking about when you're overthinking and you're constantly in your head, how do you bring yourself back to present moment? And that is just heart energy. That is the breath. You bring yourself back to the breath and you're like, I'm here. What does my body feel like? And I think this is just such a great and exciting thing because that's what expansion therapy does. It brings you back into your body and it really helps you connect to your heart chakra the most. And then we get to explore these other energies from there. So the heart is the connection to all of it. That's how I feel because the upper chakras are above, the ones we're about to talk about. Lower chakras we discussed last week. And those are really physically based. The upper ones, we get to talk about all about the spiritual and just different energy that you can't really root down into entirely. So the heart is such an interesting thing. Think about the ribs around it, thinking about shoulder mobility and movement because the rib is very much the foundation. The rib cage is the foundation of your of your relationship to self, even in a spiritual sense. So yeah, that's all I really wanted to say about the heart and the breath is it just really anchors you into the present moment and helps you connect with yourself and others.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I would add in terms of like when we see deficiencies, right, in like maybe heart chakra energy and like how that could show up for people. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's, difficulty finding breath sometimes in this upper lung area, right? So not so much down in the diaphragm, but in the upper ribs and upper lungs or under like the armpits. And how do the scapula, how do the shoulder blades actually sit and articulate on the rib cage? And when we kind of get these sometimes like, I guess I could say like dysfunctional patterns, a lot of times it's related to our breath and our breathing and an inability to actually expand the rib cage in the back and let those shoulder blades sit nicely on the rib cage. So that's like a pattern that I've personally like continue to work on because I struggle there.
I think a lot of people struggle there because a lot of people end up due to fear, right? Fear of loving oneself, but fear of so many other things. It can happen all the way down to the root chakra. It's that back fascia coming up, kind of the shoulders shrugging up. That makes you very tight in the lats too. A lot of people have a lot of like lat tightness. And so that gets us us immediately out of our rib cage. If we shrug our shoulders down, I know you're going to show us some good stuff later in our movement moment, and allow that breath to go wide, that's really opening up the rib cage and the throat chakra itself, which I think we can like blend nicely into. Would you like to start with the throat chakra?
Course, of course. So we've got our throat chakra, the energy center like literally sits like in our throat. And so this is about self-expression, communication. I like to think about even like listening here as well, because it's all about like how we're taking in and receiving information and putting ourselves like out there in the world, energetically. Physically, obviously, any kind of like dysfunction through the neck, swallowing expression. We can also look at the shoulder can come into play here too, a lot more along this radial nerve innervation line, with the throat energy. Yeah,
Yeah. Uh, Absolutely. I mean, this is big neck, throat energy. I would say suboccipitals tend to end up being third eye for me, but like anything, like you were saying, neck, jaw. This is like huge jaw problems. It can even, I mean, just naturally go up into third eye energy, which is more temporalis, but again, they all blend so beautifully with each other and they tell these wonderful stories. So for throat, it is about expression. And yeah, a lot of it ends up being because of self-love, because again, that's that foundation. So shoulders stay up, and then we stay in this protected position here. And we just kind of like use that movement impairment to keep ourselves tight and non-expressive, right? If I just curl into myself, I'm not going to be saying much or expressing myself freely. So opening up the shoulders, lifting the chest, that is very much throat energy that is starting to be unlocked. The other thing I think about is the forward head position. So if you look at the forward head like this, and everything is like shoved forward, this is tightened up here. This ends up kind of getting tightened back in this area as well. But you think about that as being knocked off your center. So if I had a string or a plumb line going through this, it would not be center. If I shoved my throat back, if I tucked my chin, my crown chakra would be able to go through third eye and throat and then heart all in alignment with each other. And I think that's fun to kind of think of postural alignment as chakra alignment because I see it so much, and we see it so much in the neck and the throat, as well as the chest for the heart chakra.
absolutely. There's like real vulnerability with the relationship and how we present ourselves physically and expressively, like in the world when we're thinking about the heart and the throat. Yeah, they all tie together beautifully, but I always see like such a strong relationship between these two. I think partially because these are areas I'm really working on in my
Yeah.
own body. And so I'm always like, oh, they're so tied together. But
Yeah,
they
if
are.
Yeah. I feel that way about sacral and root as well. When you talk about like the glutes and the SI and everything, they're so blended. And I feel that way. It's almost like there's just a little bit more of a weave or a catching there. So yeah, the throat, and then same with the third eye, I think a little bit because you need expression to see if you believe yourself or not, right? Because you have these thoughts in your root, and when we're moving on to third eye, but you have these hard evidence of root and sacral of the things that you trust about yourself, that you nurture or have pleasure around, but it's the expression of it, right? So if you have emotions, they might be trapped in the body, but how are you actually expressing them outwardly? How are you showing your personality, your characteristics, who you are is very much throat chakra energy. And that can get tied with third eye because it's around the belief of yourself. What do you believe about yourself to be true? And when you're constantly overthinking, your belief system can change just on your thoughts alone. It's like you see somebody and you have facts about how they've talked to you, but then you make up this elaborate story about them behind you, like, oh, they were kind of snarky with me, or, something like that. That's the belief of that person. That's the imagination, right? But that's not necessarily like what transpired. And I think I do that to myself all the time where I will kind of pick myself apart in my mind, and it leads to illusions, which can be lies about myself. And coming back to the belief that I get to be the sole representation of myself, and it is based in truth. Okay, what's the truth? So, I love that there's the third eye and crown are just ominous energy. They're just a little bit more like out there, but anchored in the back of the neck, and some of the facial and head stuff, that we get to talk about. But it is very much belief energy. What do I believe about myself?
Yeah, you said some really good stuff there, and it got me thinking about like how often like we make assumptions, and that kind of gets us like stuck in this like loop and kind of in the judging mind and out of like our actual like truth, if you will, because we can tell ourselves like all these stories and things instead of just asking for using our throat chakra and actually asking for clarification. We're making assumptions in our head and we're kind of getting stuck in this loop. And when we actually get more connected, like to our actual, belief system, to our throat, to our heart, all those things, there's not the fear of like actually expressing yourself and asking for like, hey, like, this situation happened and this is how I perceived it. And then like when you actually have a conversation with somebody about it, it brings a lot more clarity to your belief and you don't have to tell yourself these stories anymore. You can actually find like truth. And
Yeah.
so instead of like living in this like limbo or falsehood.
Yeah, the third eye is so interesting energy, and that's where you really have to end up anchoring a lot in the breath because third eye can just help you run away. Same with crown chakra. And so, crown chakra to me is even more ominous than third eye energy, but and then it almost becomes like black and white. And it is like, do you know what you don't know? Do you know what you know? Do you don't know what you don't know? Do you don't know what you know? You know? It's all about knowing. It's all about knowing self, knowing, or not knowing, and being accepting of that altogether. And so there is such an ominousness of there's so much unknown, but who am I in the known? What do I know about myself in this present moment? And is that enough? Do I have to go back constantly to past traumas? Do I have to fast forward to, anxiety of like what's going to happen tomorrow? Or can I just know like I am safe in this moment? I believe myself. All of these things to be true. And that is just crazy energy and that I still am trying to pick my brain around.
Yeah. I almost think of like too, like kind of like you were saying, like crown energy is like the connection to like source and that kind of divine power like outside of ourself. And, you know, back to like that trusting that, the universe has a plan for us and we're here and if we're tuning in and we're listening and we're receptive to those messages like and living in our purpose that things will work out as they should even through the difficult situations. Those things are here to guide us and teach us as well.
Yeah, I definitely look at crown physically as literally just the crown of your head when people say like the crown of your head. And even like pulling on your hair or like trying to release this area from the scalp. That's where a lot of people end up getting baldness from. And to me, that looks like maybe your channel is closed, or maybe, there's something there. I look at that as more portal energy Not and it just being ominous, right? Like that's the touch point of our body in our physical sense, but there's just so much beyond it that we have no control over and we're not supposed to. And I also think of it as that relationship, right? When we're healing people or helping people heal, we're calling on source or we're pulling from source energy or wherever, right? And it's from the crown of the head. It's kind of from crown to hands. And that's also how Reiki believes. Like or many healers believe that that's the flow of energy or the way that you need to think about energy as it flows.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right. Shall we get into our movement moment? All right.
absolutely.
So today we're going to do a technique to help you connect to your breath a little bit better into this kind of area of our side ribs underneath the armpit and to that heart energy, which can be really difficult to find sometimes. So for this, you're going to want to grab like a small hand towel or something like that. So grab a hand towel, I'll give you a second there to do that. And then you're going to find a comfortable seat and you're going to want to make sure that you're grounded to the floor so that your feet aren't necessarily dangling free, but that you can plant the base of the big toe, the pinky toe, and the heel into the floor. And make sure that your sit bones are nice and grounded into your chair and that you're not arching your back too far forward or slumping down into your chair either. From there, you're going to take your little towel roll and you're going to place it under one of your armpits. And you're going to want to find an anti-shrug. So if this is shrugging and the shoulders are coming up towards the ears, you're going to want to make sure that they're sitting away from the ears. And as we're breathing, you're going to want to check in as well, because as the pressure canister fills, this might happen. So just notice, bring awareness if you start to notice that the shoulders shrug down. So go ahead and take an exhale. And then on your inhale, you're going to push your elbow in towards your side ribs as you fill your breath in towards the towel and that armpit area. And the towel is just providing you a little bit of a tactile cue to send your breath into. Notice the position of the shoulders. Are they shrugging up? Do I need to reset them? Shrug them down a little bit as you take that next inhale and breathe into that area. Kind of pushing that breath out into that towel roll and feeling those upper side ribs expand and that breath expand into the heart energy.
You know, when you do it right, you can feel it like move. The armpit
Yes.
moves. I love it. Well, thank you for being here with us and thank you for that movement moment.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.